Hello my friends, and welcome back to another video. Today is going to be my favorite thrillers and mysteries of 2023. I have 8 books here. I decided to combine thrillers and mysteries. I did read some mysteries this year that became some of my absolute favorites, and I wanted to include them in my end of the year content, but I didn't have enough to have just like a full dedicated video to mystery books, and so I decided to combine them with thrillers because I feel like they do have some overlap sometimes. So I thought it would be okay to have like a little combo video. So I have 8 books here that are my favorite thrillers and mysteries that I read, and I'm very excited to talk about these because a lot of these are just so good and I had so much fun reading them this year, and I feel like they need to be talked about and they just need some love. So let's get into my favorite thrillers and mysteries of this year so I can talk about some books that I had such a fun time reading. So first up is Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. I absolutely loved this book. I didn't know if I was going to enjoy it because it is a thriller that has to do with time travel, and while I don't hate time travel in books, I feel like sometimes it just doesn't really work very well. So I was a little concerned that I was going to find this, I don't know, maybe like weird, or it just wasn't gonna be what I wanted it to be. Maybe it was gonna be too sci-fi. I just really didn't know what to expect with this one, and I haven't heard too much about it. I have heard some, but I really hadn't heard a lot of people talking about this one. But I wanted to give it a chance and see what it was like, and I'm so glad I did, because I feel like this is such a unique and fresh and different thriller. I feel like the story really needed the time travel aspect. Not that the story itself is bad, it's just it's amplified so much by the time travel, and it just wouldn't be as good. It wouldn't be as like hard-hitting, I guess. Not that this is like that deep of a thriller, but I feel like it just wouldn't have been as impactful without that time travel aspect, and I really feel like that's the biggest reason why I really loved this story. This is about this mother who's waiting for her 18-year-old son to come home, and it's midnight, he's running a little late, and she's watching out the window for him to make sure he's getting home safe, and she ends up watching him kill another person. And she ends up going back in time to put the pieces together to figure out what's going on, why he did that, and how to put a stop to it. This had so many twists and turns. I only predicted one aspect of this thriller, which is a huge deal for me. I talk about that all the time. I hate guessing things. I hate predicting things, especially in thrillers. It really gets on my nerves. And this story, the way it's written, I just never saw anything coming, and I felt completely like blindsided all the time, which I loved. It was a good thing. I'm happy that happened. But I was just reading and I would just be like, oh, I can't believe that just happened. Oh my god, wait, that makes so much sense. It was just such a fun experience and such an easy thriller to get sucked into, and I just had such a good time reading it. After it was over, it was one of those books where I was like, oh, I wish I had something that was just like it so I could go on to that and keep having this feeling, like keep reading something that makes me feel like this. So I was really sad after it ended, which again is a good thing because it meant I really enjoyed this book. But I need more thrillers like this. I need more thrillers to be fresh and different and try to do something, I don't know, fun and just like interesting. I just feel like this book had everything that I really wanted in it, and I ended up giving this 4.5 stars, but I did round it up to 5 because the little half star that I took off was only because I felt like one thing was a tiny bit predictable. This is much more of a 5-star read, and I just absolutely devoured it, loved it. I want more thrillers to be like this. And then we have Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates, my queen, my favorite author of all time. I really loved this thriller. I think what made this thriller so fun for me, besides it being written by Darcy Coates, is that it starts off so quickly. I feel like a lot of thrillers have this beginning where they're trying to, you know, explain things, they're trying to get you into the story, they're giving you background information, you know, and a lot of it is necessary sometimes because you can't just be thrown head first, but this one throws you head first. It completely shocked me how quick everything happened in this story. From the very first like page, I was like, whoa, what? Oh, okay, we're just going. We're in it. We're here. Okay, which I loved. Was so excited by just being thrown into the book immediately. I'm also a sucker for a snowy, wintry, isolated setting. I always find those much more interesting and much more thrilling. It's my favorite kind of setting, especially for a thriller or a horror. I just feel like there's something very terrifying about being isolated and surrounded by snow and having no access to, you know, roads or help or phones, you know. I just feel like those aspects make everything more dire and raise the stakes so high. Now, I know a lot of people think this one is super predictable, and I will say I do think it is a very typical thriller. I don't think that the story is anything super different or super wild or like crazy, but I think the way that Darcy wrote this story was really well done, and I think I'm just such a fan of how she writes her stories that I was kind of lulled into not really thinking about what was going on or who was doing it. I wasn't trying to come up with theories while I was reading, which I do tend to like come up with theories and try to figure out what's going on before it's revealed to me, which ends up ruining the book for me as well. So I think what Darcy did is I was just so happy to be reading her writing that I wasn't really anticipating anything, which worked out in my favor because I didn't see the twist coming at all. Now, after finishing it, I definitely should have seen the twist coming because it was very obvious, especially I think to someone who reads a lot of thrillers. I think you could probably figure out what's going on. I think because of the writing and that it's just a really fun, snowy thriller, I think a lot of people will look past it and not really care that you can predict what's going on. And I know some people don't care about predicting. I know some people really enjoy the fact that they can figure out what's going on in a book. I think it was just an overall fun story, and it was just what I needed. Something easy and simple and something to get sucked into, which is exactly what it did. It's about a tour group that's going into the mountains. They get hit by a storm. They have to take shelter in a cabin, and when they wake up the next morning, their tour guide's head has been removed from his body and stuck up on a branch in a tree. And then, of course, they have to figure out who it is among them that is doing it. So I do love a mystery like that where, you know, you're in a isolated setting with a group of people and you have to figure out who is doing stuff. I always think that's really fun. So I just think this really worked for me. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. I don't think many people will be shocked to see this one on my list, but I also think a lot of people are gonna have this on their favorite books of 2023 lists just because I know it had a lot of praise, and that is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. Now, Lisa Jewell is one of my favorite thriller writers of all time. I just think she has a way of writing. I think she has a way of getting me invested. I always love her characters. I always love her plots. Even if they are predictable, I feel like there's just something about her writing that keeps me coming back, and I almost don't even care that I know what's happening in the story. I almost don't even care that I have a huge inkling on what's going on. It's just something about her writing that makes me really happy to be reading and excited to be reading. I don't necessarily think this book is the craziest, wildest thriller of all time. I think some people will probably hate this plot, mostly because people are saying that it is a crazy book. And I do agree. This is a very crazy thriller, but I think it's for reasons that people aren't expecting. I don't think this has mind-blowing, blindsiding twists that are just gonna smack you in your face, right? It's not that kind of story. What kind of story this is just that you can't trust anybody. Everyone is hiding something, everyone is not really likable, and everyone is just telling you things that sound like they could be plausible, but you're not really sure. You're not 100% sure. So you kind of have to play detective a little bit. You have to kind of think to yourself, what do I believe? What do I think is true? And I think it's a very interesting story because of that, because of how it makes you kind of look at everything from all angles. I really liked the ending of this one because to me it was jaw-dropping. Again, you never really know what's going on. You never really know what's happening fully, if you're getting the full story, if any of it's even real or not. So I think that's why the ending was so shocking to me, is because it was kind of like a, oh my god, you did this to me. Like, of course that's how you're gonna end this book. Like, of course you are. This has a podcast element that I know a lot of people are tired of, but I personally really, really enjoy and love. There's also a podcast element and like a Netflix TV kind of aspect to it, and I just really loved it. Again, I love Lisa Jewell. I think she writes incredibly, and I always have a good time while reading her books, but this is by far my favorite, and I did give this one 5 stars. Then we have Whalefall by Daniel Kraus. This is a very interesting book. I had high hopes for it because this is about a scuba diver who gets swallowed by a sperm whale and only has an hour until his oxygen runs out. And I was hoping this one was gonna be like exhilarating and keep me on the edge of my seat, and honestly I was hoping it was gonna terrify me because I am scared of the ocean, and I think being swallowed by a whale sounds horrific. So I was, you know, hoping that this was going to be what I wanted it to be, and it really was, but so much more. I was so claustrophobic while reading this. I was getting so anxious, and that usually doesn't happen to me, especially in thrillers. More so, I think I would be more anxious when reading a horror book. Thrillers, I'm usually just kind of like, oh, okay. Wow. But like, this one really got to me. I think it was just the aspect of being underwater and being inside the whale. That just sounded terrible, and I was getting really nervous. But the chapters are extremely short, so you just keep flipping and flipping pages to find out what's going on. Is he gonna get out of the whale before his oxygen runs out? Is he gonna make it? Is he gonna die? I mean, it was just kind of like a story where I just couldn't put it down. I was so invested and so consumed by finding out how this was gonna end. I think this story does something else, is it's definitely about a father-son relationship, and it's very sad, and it's very heartbreaking and kind of depressing, but in like a very beautiful way. I don't think you would expect this book to have like a heartfelt storyline going on alongside it, and I think that's what made this book so different and so interesting. Those two different stories going on at the same time, it kind of was weird, but in a really good way, and it made the story, I think, more impactful and more interesting. And again, just a very anxiety-inducing story. I read this and I was just like, oh my god, my heart is racing. I am petrified of what is going to happen. So I loved every second of this. It was a very quick read, very easy read. I flew through it. I loved the story, and I gave it 5 stars because it was just such a good read. The next one is more on the mystery side than thriller for me personally, and that is Before You Knew My Name by Jacqueline Bublitz. This is a very sad story. This is very heartbreaking, and I feel like if you're a fan of true crime or fictional true crime or books like The Nothing Man by Catherine Ryan Howard, I think you would really enjoy this one. It has kind of a literary fiction type of writing style, which I'm not usually the biggest fan of. It really worked because I think the messaging of this story was just so beautiful. I have such a soft spot for stories that deal with missing persons cases or women that have been murdered. Stories like that, I just have such a soft spot for, and I always just really gravitate towards them. And this story is kind of a dual POV, and one of the POVs is a girl telling the story of how she died, and the other POV is a woman who found her dead body. And you kind of just are along for the ride of both of them telling this story in bits and pieces, and I don't think it's super twisty. I don't think you're gonna have a hard time figuring out what this story is leading to or what it's about, but I just think it's a beautiful story. I think it is super emotional and devastating. I think it does some really great messaging on being a woman and the way we feel going out and having to deal with men and being scared and, you know, always making sure we're prepared for the worst. And I just really loved how this story handled everything. The ending made me sob like a little baby. I was just, my heart was shattered into a million pieces. It was such a devastating read, but in a really good way, if that makes sense. It was hard-hitting and beautiful, and the writing did grow on me. It took me a while to get into the literary style, but it did overall work, I think, in the book's favor. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. Yeah, I just like how it made me feel in the end, too. Next up, we have The Decagon House Murders by Yukito Ayatsuji. This is such a good mystery. I believe this is kind of a reimagining of Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. I've never read that one, so I couldn't really compare the two, but this was such a well executed mystery in my opinion. It does all the things that I love, and I thought the twists were so good. I couldn't predict a single thing in this book, which again is such a selling point for me. So this is about K University's mystery club, and they end up going to this island, Tsunojima, which is supposedly haunted. They just think it's like the perfect destination, and they want to get the group together, spend some time there, see what's going on, and one of the members ends up dead, and so they decide to use their mystery solving skills because they read lots of mysteries and they think that they're very good at them. So they decide to try and figure out which one of them is up to no good before they all die. And I absolutely just loved this. I thought it was such a fun mystery novel. I really loved the characters. I loved just like the atmosphere and the writing. I loved every second of this book. Again, the twists were so good. It had my jaw on the floor. When I finished this book, I was shocked. I had no idea what this book was going to do, and it just blew me away. It was such a fun read and just what I want from a mystery, and I love these kinds of mysteries. I love where someone ends up dead and they're in an isolated setting, so they know one of them is the one doing it, so they have to try to figure it out before they all die. I just love that kind of situation. I just think it's so much fun, and I just think it's such like a classic storyline for a mystery, and I just don't ever get tired of it, honestly. But this one I think is probably like the best one I've ever read. I just think it did such a great job. It blew me away. Again, I can't compare it to Agatha Christie's. I've never read And Then There Were None by her, so I don't know how similar they are. I cannot tell you that. But all I know is how this one worked for me and how much I absolutely loved it. I did give this 5 stars. And then we have The Appeal by Janice Hallett. I loved this mystery. I thought it was so much fun. I had a blast with this one. I felt so nosy sifting through the emails and the text messages between the group of people that we were like looking into. I was like getting very excited having to read their emails, which I feel like is such a weird thing to get excited about, but I'm a very nosy person, so I was very excited that I had to go through all these emails and like look for evidence and try to figure out who was acting suspicious, who was hiding things, who was doing what. Like, I loved that. I ate it up. Like, I was so invested. Plus, I feel like with this kind of format, just like text messages and emails and like that mixed media formatting, it just makes a book feel so much quicker and easier to read. Like, this feels like kind of a thicker book, but because of the mixed media formatting, I feel like it was just so easy to fly through. But this is about this local theater group called the Fairway Players, who are, you know, getting ready to put on a play when this devastating thing happens. Their director finds out that their granddaughter has a rare form of cancer. The Fairway Players obviously want to help out, so they start raising money, but it starts becoming a little suspicious, and they're wondering if, you know, if people are lying about certain things. Does the granddaughter have cancer? Is the money that they're raising for this new experimental treatment actually legitimate? Like, they have no idea what's going on. And so you're following these two attorneys who are looking into the case, and you are alongside them also looking at all the evidence, trying to figure out what's going on. I don't know what it was about this, but it felt so exciting to me. Like, I was just so invested from the moment I started. I know a lot of people said that it was kind of hard because there were a lot of people in the theater group. I believe there are like 15 people that you have to keep track of, but the book does include the list of the fairway players and like who they are and how they're related to each other, and I felt like that was actually really helpful, but I didn't actually use it that much. I felt like just getting immersed into the emails made it fairly easy for me to figure out who was who and like their writing style and kind of like their speaking voice. I could see through their emails, so I was able to distinguish the people pretty quickly, which I think also made my experience more enjoyable because it was not too complicated for me. I did give this one 4.5 stars. I only took half off because I did feel like at certain points it felt like I was getting the same information repeated to me, because after I sifted through all the emails, the attorneys would go back through all the evidence I just went through and summarize it. But I was like, you're just repeating everything I already know. Like, I just read through these. I'm aware. And I think it would be helpful to a lot of people to have that like summary. I think for me it was just a little frustrating because I was like, no, I know, keep going. Like, I don't need to stop. I need to keep going. So that was like my only thing. But I felt like the actual murder mystery aspect was really well done. I thought the twists were really good. And I actually didn't guess who it was. So I was pretty impressed that this book did surprise me and throw me off, which again is something that I love and enjoy. So I was very, very, very pleased with this one, and I just had the best time reading it. It was such an enjoyable experience, and I really do want to read more from Janice Hallett. And lastly is The Last Word by Taylor Adams. Now, when this book was coming out, I was very hesitant because No Exit is one of my favorite thrillers of all time, and I just felt like I didn't know if he could top No Exit. I didn't know if I was going to get my hopes up too high and I was going to be sorely disappointed, because I do know Hairpin Bridge by this author wasn't as well received as No Exit, so I was very hesitant about this one. I was very nervous, but I think because I was hesitant, I went in expecting to hate it, and I ended up really, really, really enjoying this one. I've seen mixed reviews. I've seen people not love it. I've also seen people absolutely adore this one, and I definitely fall into the category of absolutely loving it. I thought this was so much fun. The idea of this one, I think, really added to my enjoyment, because this is about the main character, Emma, who's with her dog, and she's staying in this beachfront home in Washington. She's very isolated, and she reads a really bad horror novel and she gives it a 1-star review. She just tells it how it is and says how much she disliked it, and the author gets into an argument with her online, and you know, they kind of have this like altercation, but then some weird things start happening and she is suspicious that the author is out for revenge. And I think that idea just kind of made me laugh, but in a, oh my god, this could happen to me. What if this did happen to me? Like, what if? Because I've given 1-star reviews, and I've said that I hated books before, and I've been honest, so I'm always worried that like maybe an author isn't gonna take too kindly, because some authors don't handle it the best, let's just say. So I think I was putting myself in Emma's shoes, and I was like, oh my god, if this happened to me, I would be petrified. So I think the whole situation just like amplified my feelings and anxiety about this story. So I think that helped me really, really enjoy it. But honestly, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. I was very invested. I was very intrigued. I was Actually very worried for Emma and her dog. Thankfully, the dog does make it. I don't want anyone to worry. The dog is fine. The dog lives, okay? I'll just tell you that up front. I think I was just like worried for them. I was like, oh my god, the dog, Emma. I do think this is a tiny bit predictable, which is why I gave this 4.5 instead of 5 stars. I did guess something about this book, which I was a little disappointed by, but it didn't ruin everything for me because I didn't guess like the full twist. I only guessed like part of the twist, which I think made me much happier. I can see why some people didn't like this book because there are some things that I personally thought were kind of funny additions to the story, but I think some people just thought that they kind of ruined it. But for me, it didn't ruin it. I loved it, and I thought that it just made the story better and more enjoyable in my opinion. So overall, I had such a good time with this one. I'm glad I gave it a chance and I didn't overthink it too much about No Exit. While they're completely different books and I don't feel like they're very similar, I still enjoyed them both, and I feel like they both have different qualities that I really, really like in thrillers. So I'm glad I gave this one a chance, and I did decide to read it, and it was a lot of fun. Alright my friends, that is going to do it for my favorite thrillers and mysteries of 2023. I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts. Let me know if you agree or disagree with me on any of these. Let me know what your favorite mystery or thriller of the year was. I would love to know, and if I haven't read them, I can add them to my TBR. If you enjoyed listening to me talk about these books and you love end of the year content like this, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. That way I know so I can prepare for next year. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I also have a Patreon linked down in the description box. We can become friends, talk about books, horrifying books, thrilling books, romance books, manga, all that good fun stuff. And with that being said, I hope you are having a great day, night, morning, afternoon, wherever you are, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!